Welcome back. And this topic is about ethics and responsibility. So, this is, I'm passionate about this as well. So, unintentional bias can have serious consequences. It leads to unfair treatment, perpetuating inequalities, and addressing these biases requires careful consideration of data collection, model training, and ongoing monitoring. And I alluded to this when we were speaking about the building blocks of AI. Ethical guidelines, transparency, collaborating with different stakeholders, and using techniques like fairness awareness modeling can help in building AI systems that are equitable. Looking at the first one, there's gender bias in resume screening. So, if an AI system trained on historical hiring data learns that males have been preferred for particular roles, it may unfairly favor male applicants. There's a fairness issue of female applicants being unfairly overlooked or ranked lower despite having equal or better qualifications. And a real life example of this happened with Amazon's recruiting system several years ago, where it was found that if women had, say, their hobbies as women's tennis or things that women in they were excluded. And this lasted for longer than it should have been, and so that was scrapped. There's also racial bias in credit scoring. So if a credit scoring algorithm is trained on data where certain racial or ethnic groups have historically had less access to credit, then it'll carry that forward. And so individuals from these groups may be unfairly denied credit or offered less favorable terms, even if they are financially responsible. And so this again was brought to light when the former Apple co-founder and a business partner realized that credit cards that they had received had higher spending limits than their wives. And so that particular, that was taken into consideration and brought to fore. And it happens a lot, we've seen, when it comes to mortgages for those, who are economically disadvantaged. The same again can be said about bias in healthcare algorithms, where an algorithm predicting healthcare needs may be trained on data again from one demographic, leading it to perform poorly for others. The latest example was with COVID, where even though COVID may have been rampant in economically challenged cities, those who are more affluent got the COVID, got their vaccinations first in many cases, and that's proven. There's also a language bias in the natural language processing, because they can inherit biases present in text data that they're trained on. So there'll be stereotypes based on gender, ethnicity, and other attributes. And again, for fairness, you'll get biased sentiment analysis, biased search results, or content recommendations. So it reinforces the stereotypes and excludes diverse perspectives. When we look at predictive policing, if an AI system used for the predictive policing is trained on data from neighborhoods where there's a historically high police presence, it'll target those areas, not necessarily where crime is more likely. And again, perpetuating a cycle of over policing in certain communities, leading to mistrust, negative outcomes unrelated to actual crime rates. Another key issue here is disability bias in accessibility tools. And so when you have AI-driven speech recognition systems trained mainly on voices without speech impediments, that may perform poorly for users with speech disabilities. And so it limits accessibility, inclusivity, and providing an unequal experience for users with disabilities. We're looking at, responsibility with regard to AI and data security. So we would have encryption in data transmission, for example, where financial institutions may use end-to-end encryption when transmitting sensitive information like credit card details to ensure that data can't be intercepted and misused. We're looking at access control in healthcare because hospitals must employ strict access control mechanisms to ensure that only authorized personnel can view patient records and safeguard their privacy and confidentiality of medical information. We've seen so many times where patients' information is shared, and it's totally unfair and unacceptable. Now, in cloud services, that is where we're moving to. Many organizations, even financial institutions, are moving to cloud services. So it's important to have multi-factor authentication in those services. So providers do use multi-factor authentication to protect user accounts and require multiple forms of identification before they grant access to stored data. And one thing that cybersecurity experts would always say is you must always have multi-factor authentication. I know for a fact that if I didn't have that, many of my, whether it's social media, different applications, different apps, would have been hacked by now. Because I often get those emails of, did you change your password? And then I have to go and change my password again because I didn't. When we have anomaly detection and fraud prevention, we spoke about that again in the unsupervised machine learning being the foundation block for that in chapter 5. They detect a different behavior in online transactions, and so can help in identifying and preventing fraudulent activities. I am fairly consistent, but there have been many times where my card would be declined because there are two banks that I use. They would see that. Pardon the interruption. They would see that basically I haven't used it, so they put a block on it, and I have to call. So another one is responsible AI development examples where you have bias in the hiring algorithms, going back again to what we spoke about with ethical implications. So we have to make sure that the algorithms provide for fair assessments. Now, when it comes to financial lending, AI, when AI is used to determine whether consumers are creditworthy, some banks must provide explanations on how decisions are made to the regulators and the applicants to ensure there's transparency, right? And that it wasn't based on their biases. There's ethical AI in facial recognition, where some companies have set guidelines and restrictions on how their facial recognition technology can be used by law enforcement so that people are not misidentified and law enforcement doesn't misuse the technology. Because again, we've seen where people have been incorrectly identified with facial recognition in crime. Having humans in the loop in healthcare decision making in healthcare, you can have AI-driven diagnosis or treatment recommendations are often used with human experts. So you can ensure that decisions are not only made based on an algorithm and can provide a safeguard against potential errors, because that is, in fact, a life and death, literally, situation. Looking at environmental sustainability in AI infrastructure, some tech companies focus on reducing the environmental impact of their AI infrastructure by using energy efficient hardware and renewable energy sources. I just saw yesterday this amazing concept of umbrellas in Saudi Arabia. You can Google it, where they have these massive umbrellas that protect the country, or it's in Riyadh, protect them from the heat, the amazing heat, when in the summer, but also provide warmth during the colder months. So they're outside, but they're protected, and that's amazing. And in new homes, you have sprinkler systems, but they do have a measure that does switch off our sprinkler systems when there has been rain or when there is rain. So just in case you didn't switch it off during the winter and the rainy season, it's definitely not gonna the sprinklers won't come on. And I love that. Children's safety, that's a lot. Like platforms like YouTube employ AI algorithms designed with children's safety. So it restricts inappropriate content and adheres to the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And so data security and responsible AI development require a comprehensive approach that include technological safeguards, ethical guidelines, regulatory compliance, and continuous monitoring. So it shows the multifaceted nature of these challenges and the measures that are being taken to address them in different domains and contexts. So by embracing best practices in data security and responsible AI, organizations can build trust, protect individual rights, and just make sure that AI serves the broader societal good.